I don't know anybody that's super saturated with it.
Yeah.
Most of us are wanting more. We just don't really know what it is we want. What we want is a friend.
Right.
But it's hard.
It's really
to develop friendships.
Yeah.
You have to be in it for the long haul.
Right. And
you know that better than most people.
So this is your last dance.
Whoa.
Right?
And I'm dancing with you.
Your last dance. And I'm leading. So
you are leading.
It's your last CitiServe dance at least. So, but we'll get to the CitiServe stuff and why you're leaving and all that stuff later, hopefully. Really,
Chris, nobody knows I'm leaving.
They will now. Can you edit that out? Because I just announced it. So
yeah.
So my guess is this is 100, or you will have done 100 by the time we get this out.
Yeah.
You asked the question of everyone else to tell their story.
Yeah.
I'm guessing people know you as Pastor Jeff. They don't call you that because you would be mad at them for that, but they know you as a pastor, and it's like over 40 years, right? Close to 40 years of ministry and pastoring.
About 35.
30. Okay, so almost 40.
Yeah.
And does that include CitiServe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
32 with Evangel and then 3.5 with CitiServe.
So they know you as Ministry Jeff, Pastor Jeff, CitiServe Jeff, but they don't know you as Cowlitz Jeff. Yeah. Or Longview Jeff or football playing Jeff. So let's just start back at the beginning. Before you were a Christian, before all of this became a thing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your story.
Moved to Cowlitz County when I was a kid, 6th grade, because they opened a mill a Crown Zellerback mill in Wana.
Okay.
And my dad came down to help
pick
that up.
Right?
Yeah. And that was before they had Highway 30 going through to Cowlitz County. So there was this old road that kind of switched back through Rainier. And I remember we got to that place and you could only drive like 25 miles an hour because it was really narrow and tiny road.
Yeah.
And I remember asking my dad, I go like, where are you taking us? I had visions of like, follow the yellow brick road or something like that. It was just weird. And
so you'd never been here?
Never been to Cowlitz County. And then we were having a house built in Cowlitz County, so we lived in Westport, which is like Mayberry. Literally, we got to Westport, unloaded our stuff in a motel, which we were going to live in for a year until our house was finished.
Right.
And some kids came out to me and they were like, hey kid, you play baseball? I go, yeah. They said, come on, we're gonna play in Cowlitz County. Come on, you can be part of our team. And so like
this first day you're there?
First day we were there. Yeah, so I made friends there, but then we moved to Cowlitz County, had a new house, all new friends and all new school and all that stuff. And I didn't know any different. I mean, we came from Oregon City, which wasn't all that big back then, and had fun being in junior high.
What was fun about it?
I think it was just our house was next to some woods, and so we could just go terrorize the woods and just be kids and get into trouble. Not much, but a little bit of trouble, and it's just fun. It was fun.
And not get caught.
Well, yeah, pretty much not get caught. Then got into high school, and a friend of mine, his dad started a Suzuki dealership, and so a bunch of us 14-year-olds got Suzuki 90s, and there was like 8 of us that got Suzuki 90s, and we were all just went up in the hills outside of Cowlitz County and had fun, and then we started getting into partying and drinking and stuff like that, and I was well versed at that, and was kind of like I was always like the second best guy at everything. I was never the best guy at anything, so was that way in sports. We played. You didn't never try out for a team. You made the team if you went out because it was so small.
Right.
But I liked the small town life. It was fun. You knew everybody. Everybody knew you. So then I went to college at Mount Hood, got a degree in respiratory therapy, and
did you do sports there? Or?
Played a little tennis, but not much.
Were you second best?
No, I was not even close to second best at Mount Hood. Yeah, so that was fun, and But I was a total heathen, in every way. I just enjoyed life. I was the center of everything of my life. So everything kind of revolved around me. So I was self-centered and prideful and arrogant. But I was okay. I was a nice guy and I was nice to people and stuff like that. So I had friends and kind of popped around from hospital to hospital in Portland after I got out of school and met Jody when she was in nursing school. And I was working at Monticello Medical Center. And it was the first time. I was 24 and she was 19, just turning 20. First time I ever even thought about being with somebody for long term. And
so let's pause there for a minute. Just curious, what was it about Jody that caught you?
Have you seen her?
Yeah, yes, I have.
Well, she was even better then.
All right.
She was beautiful. I mean, I still remember her walking through the ICU, and I was a respiratory therapist at the hospital, and thinking, whoa. She was in nursing school, and she was beautiful.
So that caught your eye, but what caught your heart?
There was no difference back then. I wasn't a Christian. I was a lustoid, and so I asked her out. She said no. I asked her out again. She said no. Finally I said, let's go just have ice cream and talk or something like that. She finally said yes. After she tried to sneak away and so the first time we met, she said, I want to have 5 boys and I want to marry a Christian, because she had just got saved about 6 months before that. And, so I listened intently, and then afterwards I called her back about 5 minutes later and said, this isn't going to work, because I'm not the guy you want to marry, and I don't want to pursue a relationship if it's not going anywhere.
Right.
And then called her back about 10 minutes after that and said, I made a huge mistake. Let's at least give this a shot. And so it was back and forth with us. But eventually I just realized whatever she had, I thought was pretty impressive as far as a relationship with God. So I just went for it and just said yes to God, which to me meant I would go to church. But it really wasn't a yes to God.
So you hadn't had any kind of faith experience?
None.
Or
Never
was
been
it
to
just
a
saying,
church.
you were basically saying yes to Jody?
I was
in the
saying yes
context
to
of saying
whatever
yes
it took to get
God.
Jody.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
then what?
It was back and forth a little while, trying to figure out what was all going on. We were part of a church that had just been started.
Okay.
Shekinah just started. And it was charismatic, and everybody was really loud and huggy, and I love you, Jesus, but I also love all the people too. And so I wasn't used to being around it. I thought it was a bunch of weirdos. And then, within a couple of months, I became one of the weirdos. And we got married, and I got baptized, said that I was a Christian, got married, and then I realized I really probably wasn't a Christian. I just did what I was supposed to do to get her. And then we moved up to Everett almost immediately because some job stuff. We wanted to pursue some jobs, and sitting at a church up there, New Life Fellowship up there, and they were doing an altar call, which during that time in the church, it happened all the time,
right,
every Sunday.
Right.
And I was praying, or I was just asking God, do you want me to go up and do something, confess something?
Right.
And I felt like the Lord said, I really felt like I heard him say, how many more times are you going to do this?
It's good.
And I'm like, I guess I'm done. I guess I'm in the club now. And so I think that was my point of salvation when I relinquished that doubt.
Right.
I just gave up the doubt and said, okay.
Took a real step.
Yeah. It wasn't much of a step. It was more just saying yes.
Yeah.
But it was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Changed my life. And after that, I was reading in the book of Revelation one night late, and the Lord said, quit your job and move back to Longview.
So wait a second. You're reading the book of Revelation.
I know.
Not the Gospel of John, and not Mark or Matthew, but the book of Revelation.
Probably scared the snot out of me. But yeah.
Do you remember where, or just
where?
Maybe where in Revelation you were reading?
Probably the first chapter. It didn't take much.
Didn't take much. Okay.
Paul fell on his face. I figure I probably did the same thing too.
So what did the Lord say?
He said, I want you to go back to Longview. I want you to quit your job, which I only had for like 6 months.
Wow.
And went back to Longview, went back to Shekinah, got a job back at St. John's, and the rest is history.
Well, the rest is kind of history. Let's hear how that.
As far as being a believer.
Oh, okay, I got you. How that unfolds. So you're living in Longview again. And
Yeah.
Jody and you are both working in the hospital, I would guess.
Yeah. Same shift.
Same shift.
We were still in the first year of marriage, so I bought a sailboat, and we were both working evening swing shift.
The sailboat.
And we just lived on the thing. We were out there all the time together, spent a lot of time together. It was really good for our marriage, really good for our relationship.
So Jody wanted 5 kids. When did that start? Because you got 5
couple
kids.
Years. We didn't have kids for a couple of years. Thought we were going to live on a sailboat in Kalama, and then she got pregnant, which was kind of funny because we didn't plan it or anything like that. Right. It just happened the first time, and then it happened 4 more times, about every 2 years, and so we ended up with 5 kids. Now we have 12 grandkids, and yeah, big family, and it was crazy. We had our 5th child. Well, I had grown up at Shekinah, kind of like learn how to lead worship and learn how to be a leader, learn how to be responsible and to care about people other than myself. And that was fun, making that transition.
So who taught you that kind of stuff? Was it a group of guys, or was it people,
just
anyone
watching,
in particular,
learning.
Or just by osmosis kind of you picked it up?
Yeah. I think that I'm a big advocate of learning by example. Mm-hmm. I think that one of the best ways to learn is just to pay attention to what's going on around you. You can learn some bad stuff too. You can learn some bad habits, but you can also learn what it means to be a man, learn what it means to be a husband, a father, you know, and especially I didn't know what a Christian was supposed to be like. So I was paying attention to that part of their lives. You know, how do you walk with God and be authentic, not be a fake about it, you know? So I was paying attention to the whole God thing.
And that was modeled for you at Shekinah in a really good way.
Yeah. Because we were all kind of in that, we were all about the same age, all growing up together in the faith. And some of these guys have been at church a lot longer, but they were rediscovering their faith in a more Holy Spirit centered way. And so everything was alive and exciting.
Yeah. And my guess is less structured. And a little bit more open, and everyone can jump in.
Well, when you're a heathen all your life, everything's structured in church.
That's probably true.
Less structure from people who had been in church for a long time. But yeah, I thought it was crazy.
Yeah,
I thought it was really fun, and I never didn't want to be there.
Okay,
like when the door back then we were meeting Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night,
right,
and
every time the door was open, you were there.
I loved it. I was learning a lot about the gifts of the Spirit, connected with the vineyard and listened to how they did things. And they were really free with their teaching and really helped you learn and grow.
So if I remember correctly, you took some trips. Is that time frame, or is after? So kind of give me the run up to being called into ministry and
Vineyard
starting the church. The whole
Vineyard was doing a lot of conferences. They did a worship conference, an evangelism conference, prayer conference, and then they did a lot of church planting then. And they were expanding the movement. It wasn't really a church denomination. It was a movement. They were expanding the movement and planting a lot of churches. And so they had a lot of things written down about how you plant a church. Okay. And I got a hold of that stuff. And
notebooks and binders, that kind of thing.
And I thought, it's kind of cool. It's so organic. And so it doesn't look like it's difficult to do. And I talked to my pastor about it, and he assumed that I was going to become a vineyard church. But I loved it, Shekinah. I just want to be Shekinah. I wanted to be like I was there. And so I prayed for a year about whether or not to pastor. And I wanted to hear God. I wanted to know that was what he wanted me to do and not just something I wanted to do.
Did a group of people know that, or just you?
Nobody knew. And Jody knew.
Did Roger know?
Not really, huh?
Okay. So it's just you and Jody.
Me and the Lord.
And the Lord.
Because I didn't tell her. Because what happened was I would pray. I'd walk around my neighborhood and pray, and the Lord would say, I'd say, do you want me to do this? Let me know. I'm ready. And he would say, I love you, Jeff. And I'm like, yeah, but there was a specific question, right. and he would just kept saying, I love you, Jeff. And over and over, kind of in a monotonous kind of way, I thought, I don't know why I kept asking the question because it kept coming up with the same answer. But one time I was praying and he said, it didn't say, I love you, Jeff. He said, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And I said, well, if I could do what my pastor does, have that kind of a life, I'd really enjoy that. And so he said, yep. And that was my call into ministry.
So pause for a moment. Why do you think the Lord was saying the same thing? I love you. What was the setup?
Because I was going to need to know that. Because pastoring is hard.
And you didn't think it was?
I thought it was fun. I didn't realize that people could be mean and they could disappoint you. And, so it didn't take long before I realized why he was saying, I love you. Is because I was going to need to know that he loved me when it didn't seem like some other people did.
That's good.
It was a big deal.
Yeah. So you started Evangel, what year was that?
1991, February.
You had a group of people coming from Shekinah. How did that work?
That was weird too. I mean, everything about my walk with God has been a little outside the box. So that explains a lot.
Right.
We were going to plant the church and had a date. The couple weeks before that, the pastor called me up in front and they ordained me and said, anybody who wants to go with Jeff can go. We had a church of about 500. So I don't think he really thought that through. But I mean, we started the first Sunday a couple of weeks later with about 60 people.
Wow. That's a good start.
And they were all people who had grown up at Shekinah and become kind of like middle management. Mm-hmm. There was enough leaders at the top, and so this was something for them to do and be involved in. And some of them, it was a hard decision because they were leaving the pastor that they loved for this guy who they didn't know really could actually do this stuff. So, but we started, and it was 3 months after the birth of my fifth child. Kelly was born in November, and then we started in February. And so I still remember the first Sunday, and I was leading worship, and I saw my wife come in with this trail of 5 kids behind her with diaper bags and strollers. And I thought it was heaven. Yeah. She wasn't quite convinced.
I was going to ask you, what did Jody think?
She had a hard time. It was difficult. It was really difficult.
Difficult leaving Shekinah or coming in? Everything.
Yeah,
so change.
She doesn't like change a whole lot. Right. And I'm kind of a changeaholic. And so I like movement. I like things changing. And so she just left all her security, and here she was doing this thing that she hadn't been called to. And so right off the bat, I was like, hey, listen, you don't have to be a pastor's wife. You're a nurse, just be a nurse, be a mom.
Right.
I'll do the pastoring. And so that helped a lot because it took a lot of the pressure off.
Did the congregation support that? Did they push on that?
I don't think I asked them. But she was more important. I wanted her.
My guess is they honored that.
I guess.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything.
That's honoring.
Nobody walked up to her and said, hey,
are you the pastor's wife?
What do you do
play the
around
piano
here since you're the pastor's wife? I mean, a lot of times we didn't even sit together because I was busy scurrying about and she was taking care of kids. And so sometimes they were wondering, who is your wife? Are you married?
That's good. So talk about your kids for a little bit.
They're the best.
Just for what did being a pastor's kid, I mean, I know they probably didn't, they were pastor's kids whether they wanted to be or not, and whether anyone else defined them by that or not. How did that experience shape them?
Well, one of the things I've found out is that my impression of how life was going during that time was different than everybody else's impression. And so I thought they were having a great time. I was not putting any pressure on them to be something or do something, kind of like with Jody. And I think the church was really gracious with them. They didn't really call them to do anything, but they still, I think they wondered, who am I supposed to be? How am I supposed to play a part in all this, except for just tagging along with Dad? And so I think I wish somebody would have taken me under their wing and said, this is how you be a parent to your kids if you're a pastor. Right. I don't think anybody did that.
What do you when you say that, what do you mean by that? What maybe not being very specific, but what would you tell another pastor?
I think I assumed a lot. I assumed they were getting it. I assumed they understood. I assumed that they knew what my expectations were of them. And my expectations were, don't sit in your chair and be quiet. Be involved, be active. And sometimes they were too active, and people probably wanted to be quiet. Right. And we just never had any conversation. I was so busy planting a church, I never took the time to really be a parent the way I think I probably should have. I should have paid a little bit more attention to them. That's good. I should have been more helpful to them about explaining what was going on in their lives because of me.
Yeah.
I wish I would have done that better. And there's a couple of things, like one of the big regrets I have about my kids that I only discovered about 7 or 8 years ago was I wished I would have helped them articulate their faith. Because I helped teach them about who Jesus was and what he was like, but I didn't really help them talk about that. And I wish I would have done that. I think that would have been really helpful for them.
Yeah, I think that's not just a pastor's thing. That's a parent thing.
Yeah, probably.
A lot of parents don't know how to help their kids articulate their faith.
Well, you're learning it.
Yeah.
At the same time, I was learning, and so I just assumed they get it all because they were with me all the time. I probably should have been more intentional. But they also had a dad who showed up at all their games and was there if they had a boo-boo and needed help. And,
yeah. That's the beauty of pastoring, because you can be a little more flexible. So now you're in the middle of it. You're pastoring. Somewhere in the middle of that process, or first 5 or 6 years, I would guess, you started to tap into what we call the city church movement, or the unity movement, or working together with other guys, which is where we met, but a lot after this. But maybe talk a little bit about that. Some guys are taught not to mix with other pastors. That was my history.
That's helpful.
Yeah. So why did you obviously weren't taught that? Maybe it's the model you got from Shekinah, but why invest in other people or plug into other pastors? What was the impetus behind that?
It was almost immediate. We started out meeting in a union hall, which we rented on Sundays.
Okay.
So we didn't have a midweek service. We had a Sunday morning and a Sunday night service, which was why Jody disliked it so much. It was an all-day thing.
Right. You did Sunday morning and Sunday night.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then pretty quickly, I started inviting local pastors to come in and teach on Sunday nights instead of me, as a way to build relationship and build bridges and stuff. And that was really cool. I had probably 7 pastors teach on a Sunday night that first year. And then they asked us, they uninvited us to be meeting at the Union Hall, which I think was probably because they'd have parties on Saturday night and there was beer all over the floors, and they felt embarrassed. And so they said, there's probably a better place for you to meet. And so 3 churches offered to let us meet in their sanctuaries in the evening. And 2 of them I knew the pastors. One of them I didn't know the pastor, so we picked the one we didn't know.
Of course.
Which was with Jim Bass and Church of the Risen Savior. And we started meeting there in the evenings and not in the mornings. We met at 5 o'clock in the evenings. And so I would just go to other churches in the morning. And so I spent the next 23 years not meeting on Sunday mornings and going to other churches, and met almost every pastor in town that way. And so I'd just go in and listen to the service and smile at them and tell them they did a great job, and became a friend. And we started doing some citywide stuff. And because of those relationships that developed early on from me attending their churches on Sundays, we had a natural kind of friendship. So it really worked out well, but it was more pragmatic than anything else. I didn't want to stay home on a Sunday morning. I wanted to go out and see what was going on in the real churches. So I was all over the place. I mean, from Portland to...
not just in Longview and Kelso.
No, because I wanted to see what was going on in the church, what church looked like in a lot of different places. I've probably seen more different church settings than anybody I know. And it really helped me have a view of the church that wasn't centered on the pastor, but it was more like a style. There's different styles of churches everywhere, from Catholic to charismatic. And so, it was really helpful, and that really formed me.
How did it form you? I mean, expand on that a little bit.
Well, it was natural. I mean, I would go to a church on Sunday morning, and then when we had church on that Sunday night, I would talk about my experience in the other church.
God, so you're modeling.
So I was actually promoting other churches from the pulpit every Sunday night. Or not every, but...
But we're not supposed to do that, right?
Yeah.
Because we're competing against one another.
Well, and the reason we don't do that is because somebody in our congregation might like that church better than they like the one they're at.
Right.
Which is so...
Yeah.
That's
Pick
not
your word
true
nicely,
at all.
right?
Yeah. So, I was talking about people all the time. I'd talk about, being at New Covenant and Larry Russell and what a great teacher he was. And he talked about all this stuff. And I really learned something from it. I would steal worship songs from the worship leader in the morning. I'd steal sermon notes from this. It's like, I had no hesitation. I figured we were all one church, so they're not going to mind if I use some stuff that they talked about. And kind of like, I didn't steal their notes, but I would bring
their
up
ideas, right?
Bring up their ideas, yeah. And what it did was it created in me a value for people who are different than I was.
That's good. That's
yeah.
good. So how did that begin to manifest itself in the city? How does the city church work?
Well, worship was kind of central for me in the beginning. So we decided that we'd do this thing called a Jesus Night at the Columbia Theater, and we'd have 5 worship teams there, and it would be a seamless thing. So one worship team would lead worship, and then the worship leader from the next group would join in, take it to the next level, and then the next. And so the whole intent was that it would be a whole night of worship with 5 different worship leaders, and we'd see how valuable each other was. And it went great. That worked perfectly. What didn't work so well is I asked for financial support because we'd only been going a couple of years.
Right.
We didn't have any money. And so I asked for financial support. I realized then I was not a very good marketer. And so we ended up paying the bill for the whole thing.
Okay.
Which taught me a lesson.
Right.
But it also gave me a resilience when it came to going through hard times, because it was real. It was hard not to take it personally. I was being rejected, which is ridiculous. But so it taught me to work at citywide stuff and not just assume that things were going to happen. So I worked really hard at relationships from that point on, and we did a lot of worship gatherings. We did a gathering on the 4th of July at Martin's Dock, and had 18 pastors of churches cancel their service and meet there together. There was about 2,000 people. It was huge. We were all blown away by the number of people that were there, and never had been able to do an event like that since.
So why do you think that is? Why? What was? 2 things. What was going on that was so significant that guys would give up their Sunday, and then why has that never been repeated? We did a little bit of that.
Yeah, I don't know. But I think it was God. I think the Lord wanted to show us that He could give us a love for each other that we didn't necessarily even have. And it manifests itself. I remember we had all the pastors stand up in front and just lead as one voice. And it was just really cool. And so that was really formative too, because it showed me that we could do things together that I think shocked some people. And that led to a lot of different areas where we expanded it. We did some evangelistic stuff. Mark Schmutz got a bunch of Jesus videos, and we handed those out. And we did a lot of prayer stuff, and about all that stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute, because you're talking about public stuff, but maybe people don't know about the private stuff that went on in a room in a church, for years, every Thursday.
Well, even before that, I had developed this desire to go out on these field trips to wherever God was moving, wherever we heard about Him moving. Right. So we went to North Carolina, we went to Kansas City, we went to Southern California, went to Toronto, took about 6 or 7 people up to Toronto during the Toronto blessing, and that was crazy. We had a great time up there. Larry Russell and I were the 2 pastors in the group. I think we're the only pastors. And the leader of the Toronto blessing, John Arnott, grabbed us and said,
that's right.
"Hey, come follow me and I'll show you what we do here." And so we got to tag along with the leader as he prayed for people, and it was so much fun. It was so much fun. And it, again, gave me this big C experience with the church.
Yeah, it's good.
And we came back and tried to do everything he did up there on.
Right.
And it had some of the same kind of results, powerful moves of God when we got back. And so we went a lot of different places and invited people to come in here. We had some remarkable visitors from the outside world.
Yeah. What would you tell guys, men or women, pastors, who are resistant to that whole idea? How would you encourage them?
I've tried, Chris,
Yeah.
for a long time. You can't really talk people into being different than who they are.
Oh, that's true.
And, especially if you haven't loved them the way they are first, it's hard to get them to adapt themselves to a whole nother style. Sometimes they can see it and hear it and feel it and be part of it, and they'll say, well, I don't want to miss out on this, so I'm going to loosen things up a little bit. But I don't know. I don't know if I have anything to say to anybody about how they do things. I think it's about a personal relationship with Jesus that gives you hope and anticipation for things to be different.
Yeah, I'm not asking you to be more, like pastor or lecture someone, but the benefits of working together, not everyone recognizes that. No. And I was one of those people who didn't know. Yeah, you're better off. You're better off hanging out with people. Better than I can. You should hang out with other people, right? And I was the guy who resisted and only went to pastor's prayer because someone was bugging me about it, and I just wanted to get him off my back, and it was life changing, transforming. Yeah. So,
what about it?
I don't know how to get people to do that.
Yeah. What impacted you?
I'm supposed to be asking the questions, but So there's the support. There's something about being a pastor that no one else in the world knows about, and it's just helpful to have another, even if it's one guy, but a group of people who have your back and know when you're talking about what you're talking about, they also know it. And it's hard to explain what we do sometimes to people.
Yeah. And I think you wander around thinking, nobody really gets me.
Yeah.
A lot. And so, in some ways I could say, probably pretty honestly, that all that was leading up to CitiServe.
Yeah.
Because it gave me a paradigm that included value for people who are different. Probably.
Yeah. So you open the door there. Let's talk about CitiServe a little bit. So you finish Evangel.
No, I didn't finish anything.
I
was pastoring Evangel and had no intention of quitting.
Right.
I was going to be old, and I was going to pastor as long as I enjoyed it, and I never stopped enjoying it. So I loved it, and I still love it. So in March of 2022, in the middle of the pandemic, getting ready to go to bed, and the Lord said, I want you to walk with pastors and leaders, and I want you to call it CitiServe. And I thought, oh, cool, another program. So it's like I was used to getting these harebrained ideas and just doing it and starting something. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, I was getting ready to go to sleep, and this happened, and I realized, oh, no, I don't have a job anymore. He just said, you're not going to do this, but I want you to do this. It was an either or thing. And I thought, oh, Jody's going to kill me. Because I've been doing this for 32 years. And I was at the time when she thought, maybe you should think about slowing down a little, because I was still going pretty hard. And so I went and told her, and she goes, sounds like what you've been doing.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's just a different avenue for what you always have been doing from the start of your pastoring ministry. Or even before that, from the start of being a part of church.
Yeah.
You were relational, connecting to other people, and helping other
Walking
people.
with pastors and leaders sounds like what I've been doing for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
So a couple days later, I met with our elders, and I was for sure thought they were going to say, well, you can do this, but you're going to find the next pastor first.
Right.
And so we met over at Stuffy's, and they just said, this is what you've been doing. It sounds perfect. You should do this.
Right.
And I thought, oh no, my wife and the leader said yes.
Did they understand the ramifications for them? Did they quite?
No,
they didn't quite get it,
so.
did they?
I think they thought I was going to probably take care of things and get things squared away.
Both things, yeah.
And then Rick Warren, that May and June of that same year, this is a couple months later, that I've been kind of kicking around the idea and wondering what it would look like. And Rick Warren was transitioning out of his church in Saddleback. And so he talked about how all that was going to work. And I thought, that's a great idea. So I just basically repackaged what he did and brought it to our elders and said, I think this is what I want to do. And he presented it to the church like, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing in a different form, but somebody else is going to pastor the church, and it's up to the elders to find that next pastor. So it's like, what do you guys think? Can you do this? Will you do this? And they worked on it until about October of that same year, about 4 months. And they felt like Kevin and Nina Salinas were supposed to pastor the church. So that following January, we launched CitiServe, and I stopped pastoring the church. Although I kept going to the church. I felt like I was supposed to stay there.
And still are going to the church.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, which is unusual. So you're staying in your pattern of being a change agent and doing things different.
Yeah, you're not supposed to stay.
Yeah.
And I can see why.
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably harder than starting a church or
watching it.
Being part of a church and keeping your mouth shut.
Yeah.
I'm just not very good at that.
Right, yeah.
But I think I've done a good job. I think I've done a good job of supporting the pastors, but not being an influential voice in the crowd. Because
that's true.
They needed that. They needed to be able to have their own voice, not just echo mine.
Well, if I remember correctly too, you had a kind of a planned transition where you gave up power and you worked together at making this thing happen, right?
Yeah, we had probably about 3 or 4 months of that working together, and we met. I met with them every week or close to every week for probably a year and a half.
Yeah, and even after you turned things over, you were meeting with them and helping
just
them.
Just to support them, let them know they were not crazy. And people do stuff like that. And you do feel like that. And it is an impossible task to make everybody happy and all that stuff.
Right.
Which it is.
For sure. So I was thinking about when you were, I remember that first time you told, I think Mark and I were in the room as our normal meeting time, maybe Larry, where you told us about the dream and how excited you were. And I don't know what Mark thought. I thought you were a little bit crazy. I don't know how this is going to work, but it is who he is. So I'm sure it'll happen. It does remind me of when the Lord was telling you, I love you for so many times.
Yeah.
Because I think you still needed that reminder because it was really clear. There was no ambiguity about CitiServe. And I'm not sure I ever felt you doubt it at all, right? You just charged forward.
I wanted some confirmation from my wife and the leaders.
Right.
I wasn't going to, because I was not just going there myself. I was taking other people there.
Right.
Taking the body of Evangel through that. So I didn't want to be frivolous about the whole thing. But I also, like, when the Lord says something, I usually am pretty quick to do it. Like, we didn't, this story, but there was a prophetic guy who had come to a local church in town, and I was attending the church service, and he called me out in the crowd in the middle of the service and said, the Lord has a word for you. You're supposed to go to Kansas City.
Right.
There's something there he wants you to bring back for your city. And so, I thought that was cool. And I'd already been to Kansas City, I think, maybe not.
No, I think this was the first time.
Maybe the first time. I hadn't been there, but I knew about Kansas City. I knew that they had transitioned to the pastor had transitioned to a house of prayer. I knew all about that from somebody else who lived here that was part of that. And so then the next night I came back to the same meeting. It was a kind of 2-night meeting, and he said the same thing. Have you got your tickets for Kansas City yet? And I'm like, no. And he said, you're supposed to go. And he was really emphatic about it. You're supposed to go. There's something there you need to bring back for your city. Mm-hmm. And so then he took an offering in the middle of the conference, stopped everything, took an offering and said, here's your money. Go
Which
get
is
your ticket.
Bold in itself, right?
Yeah.
Let's give some money for this guy to go do a mission trip or a vacation.
Field
trip, yeah.
Yeah, and we went there, and they were meeting in a double wide trailer. They just started a couple months earlier, 6 months earlier, something like that. Walked into the double wide trailer and then into the prayer room, and it was like, I felt like the Lord said, "You can do this." And not me, but He was saying, you can have this in your city. And so we went back and just kind of sat on it for a while and looked for a place and looked for direction and how it might work. And I was confident that there were a lot of churches in town who would be on board and support it. And so one day at Starbucks, I was praying about it and asking the Lord, and the Lord said, "You've got a building, just give them yours.
Yeah.
Let it be a house of prayer." And it wasn't like make it a house of prayer. It's just let it be a house of prayer. And we did. We transformed Evangel into a setting that would work well for that type of prayer setting. And then I realized that prayer is a lonely gig. Yeah. Everybody is really excited at first, and then everybody's really busy. And so it was. There were a lot of times when I was leading worship and there was a couple homeless people and a couple other people in the room, and that was just the house of prayer in Longview. And then you were part of bringing Ian Rutherford and his family here, and they're carrying that on now.
Right. I do find it interesting. You always tend, or you just gather people around you. You don't like to do things by yourself, which is interesting. Nah. How did that work with CitiServe? Because that was pretty much you. You couldn't really pull. Did you pull other people into that, or other than the podcast? And maybe that's why you did that.
Well, that's why I said that everything seemed to lead up to that, because I was comfortable with the message that we need to walk together, and there's value in it. There's honor that we can have for each other, that we can do more together than we can do separately. That I believed all that stuff, and now it was a chance to communicate that one-on-one with people. So I just started meeting with people, having coffee with different leaders in town. Built a website with Rafina Bereshev. We built it together, and the whole idea behind the website was, let's do something. I know what pastors need. Let's provide what they need for them. So that came together really quickly, and we did that. And then we started doing these podcasts, CitiServe Leadership Podcast, which were meant to be an on-ramp for relationships. So I'd sit down and I'd do interviews with people like you. You were the first interview. And we sat down and talked about what your life was like. And the whole idea was, if you watch this 15-minute interview, you can learn a little bit about Chris Davis. And then expanded that not to just pastors, but ministry leaders and civic leaders. Both the mayors of Longview and Kelso, interviewed them, some business leaders, and
let's
a lot of different folks.
Why did you move outside the box, so to speak?
Because it gave. It's not just the pastors that need to know each other, but if there's a leader of the Three Rivers House of Prayer, did an interview with the superintendent there, and the whole idea was for people to get to know who she was, what she was like, what excited her about life and ministry and all that stuff. So they're just kind of a window into people's lives, which I think now as podcasts have developed, and especially long form podcasts have developed into that. They've found that if you can sit down with somebody for more than an hour, you can get them to really talk about what's deep inside. And so guys like Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan have become really proficient at drilling getting a little deeper into people. And if we could do that in the Longview area, I thought that'd be a great idea. And I thought it would really be helpful for pastors to get to know each other. The only kicker is they've got to watch them. Right. And so I spent quite a bit of time trying to encourage people. Like I would meet with somebody and I'd find out they like golf. So I'd say, hey, I did this interview with another guy who likes golf. You should watch it. And maybe you guys could get together and go out play golf. So I'd use it as a way to connect people vicariously.
So one of the points of the podcast were to be relational.
Yeah.
Well, I never caught that.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Well, that's on me, not on you. Yeah. So, I think
it was a big part of it.
I think we're so busy and we think, oh, it's another thing to watch, another thing to deal with. And you've kind of seen past that and understood at a high level how valuable relationships are. I think more than most people do.
It's in me. I mean, even when I sat down with somebody today who's my neighbor and talked to him, and the whole focus was what I've learned about relationships and how valuable that is. And here, let me encourage you with it. Because everybody needs more relationship. I don't know anybody that's super saturated with it.
Yeah.
Most of us are wanting more. We just don't really know what it is we want. What we want is a friend.
Right.
But it's hard.
It's really
to develop friendships.
Yeah.
You have to be in it for the long haul.
Right. And
you know that better than most people.
So I was thinking about how many different types of people, all sorts of ministries, all sorts of organizations. Is there a couple things? Are there things you saw in non-pastoral leaders that maybe would be helpful for pastors to know about, or are we all just kind of leaders are leaders, and the context is what kind of shapes you?
I think followers of Jesus are followers of Jesus.
Okay.
Like leaders come in a lot of different forms and a lot of different skill levels. I think one of the downsides to being a local pastor is you compare yourself to everybody, and leaders do that at a really high level. They're constantly comparing themselves with other people to see if they're doing a good job, how well they're doing, what they can learn from each other. And it's with the explosion of podcasts, that's become even more prevalent where, like I would do a church service on Sunday morning and go home and watch 2 other sermons that night to hear what my favorite pastors were saying.
Yeah, what the guys were saying.
So it wasn't just, there was a statistic that came out last year that said that 80% of people in the congregations get their information from somebody other than their own pastor.
Right.
Because they're just exposed to so much. And the quality of the teaching is amazing. I mean, you used to never be able to hear some of the best pastors in the world unless you went to a conference or got a cassette tape. Now you can just go on your phone or on your iPad and watch what happened this morning.
Right.
So it's opened the door for a lot of, the downside is it's opened the door for a lot of Christian celebrities. People become celebrities and they have followers outside their own church. And
I think it also puts pressure on pastors to how do you compare to that guy?
How can I be that one?
Yeah. And you can't.
And I did that too. I envision myself getting better at this. But, there's limits to all of us. And when I realized that I didn't have to pursue greatness, but I could just be me and realize that God liked me the way I was, the way He created me.
It's freeing.
There's a lot of freedom there. Yeah.
So this season is over, and
it's kind of interesting.
Tell us,
I spent the last 3.5 years working really hard at this, investing a lot of myself, developing a relationship with Rafina where we were really a team. So there's a partnership there. Developing a relationship with other pastors. So I shared the journey with them. And it's not without its disappointments, because I feel like it's still something, the whole idea of walking together. I don't use the word unity too much. I think it's overused, and I think it's kind of like love. It has a lot of different definitions. Yeah. And some of the definitions we're not talking about uniformity when we talk about unity. Usually we're talking about being able to link arms and walk together on the same journey, being on the same path.
That's a good way to express it.
But it's still not very popular. I mean, there's, especially with all the polarity that came through COVID and the whole Trump thing and Black Lives Matter and all the stuff that happened in Portland. We were all really close to that. There was a lot of polarity and division in the church, and we're trying to find common areas. And it's, even in the church in Longview, there's There's people who gravitate toward the edges of that.
Right.
And, you know, they're like, why would I want to join hands with the other side? And that's sad because, I mean, it's probably always existed, but it seems like a stark reality to me right now. And so there's disappointments. I suck at marketing, and because you know, and it makes sense because for 32 years, Evangel was supported by whoever chose to walk through the door.
Right.
With CitiServe, I'm like having to go convince churches and pastors to support CitiServe because I think it's a great idea, and we're all coming out of COVID. Nobody really has any extra money to invest into things like that. So, you know, it was rough that way. But more than that, you know, I didn't take a break. I went from pastoring Evangel on the last day of December.
True, you didn't.
To starting CitiServe the next week without taking a break. And that was probably foolish, but there was so much momentum in preparation for CitiServe. I didn't see how I could stop. I just had to keep the thing rolling. And so anyway, what happened was a couple months ago now, I went down to California to see my kids. And we were helping with the kids, get their kids down to bed at night. They're having some trouble getting their kids to sleep. And so we were helping them, Jody and I, and we were very successful at it. And in fact, they wanted us to move down there to help them. And so I came back feeling like, it feels so good to do something that is gratifying, that isn't ministry. And then I realized within a couple of days, I need a break from being the leader, because I'd planted Evangel in 91, pastored that church for just a little short of 33 years, 32 some years, and then immediately started CitiServe, did that for 3.5 years. Mm-hmm. And the whole time I'd been the guy up front with the mic.
Right.
And one of the things that I've learned that pastors don't really understand very well is the weight of responsibility they carry when they're leading. It's really hard. It's difficult. And I realized when I walked away from Evangel to do CitiServe, the responsibility and weight came off. And that was the first time I felt it. I was like, I remember walking through the building here and a light needed to be changed. And I'm thinking, well, I'll go get the ladder. And I think, that's somebody else's gig now. It's not my responsibility. And that was the first time I realized, whoa, there's a lot of weight to this. And, you know, when you're operating in that role comes with a lot of responsibility and weight and personal investment and being there with people and walking with people through their stuff. And it's not like you're responsible to do anything, but you're just responsible to walk with people. And that's a weight that's different than, you know, like being a lawyer and hired to take care of a case, or being a doctor and being reimbursed for your services. I mean, if you're a pastor, you're just 24/7 walking under the responsibility of caring for people. And you don't have to do a very good job of it. You can skate. You don't have to work at it. But if you work at it, it's a pretty daunting weight to carry. You know that, I think.
Yeah. So what would you tell? I mean, I think I know the answer to this if I can read your mind. If you could choose to tell pastors who are aware they're struggling, maybe some idea of the weight they're carrying, even if they don't fully understand it, what would you tell them?
Well, I think a couple of things. One thing that I never considered, which I had become a lot more open to, is give therapy a shot.
Yeah, it's good.
Talk to somebody who
I knew you were going to say that.
Who you're not in a relationship that has a role with.
You're not
somebody that's just neutral.
Right.
And let yourself hear this. No, okay, I have to say this. I have never been in therapy. It probably would have been a great idea at some points because it would have helped me. But my wife is pretty good at listening to me talk. And so what you need to do is you need to hear yourself say what's inside of you, so you can have that revelation of what's really going on inside. And most pastors don't do that with people in their church. And so it's really hard to do that. And they don't do it with each other because they're embarrassed, they're insecure, Most pastors are struggling with insecurity or pride, which is the same thing. So, it's just hard to have those conversations where you say, I have this weakness and I just need to tell somebody about it. And I know I believe this now because I had an experience last week where I had an expectation of something that should happen, and that expectation wasn't met by my peers. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, nobody gets me. Same thing again. Yeah. And, I was really hurt inside by it. I was really wounded by it. And it wasn't that big a deal, but it was wounding. And so I was, like riding my bike around the lake, trying to process it, and started to talk to Jody about it, and that didn't work very well. So I was heading home and ran into my neighbor, who's a friend of mine, and I just told him. He said, how's your day? And I said, it could be better. And then I just said, let me tell you what's just happened, and that'll explain what I mean. And I told him. Yeah. In the same way you just pour something out to a therapist. And I thought, and I went away. It took like 5 minutes to do the whole thing. Yeah. And I rode away feeling free. And I thought, why didn't I do this before? I was like, and so that's one of the things. I just heard a pastor talking about this, about how you get support from peers. And he was saying that it's really hard. And I'd never heard anybody say this before, which kind of contradicts a lot of what I've preached. Is he said that it's really hard to have the closest level of the 2 or 3 people that you really know are with you live in the same town. He goes, I've found a lot closer relationships with guys I went to college with, guys I went to seminary with, guys I had a long history with that don't live in the town that I live in, because I can pick up the phone and call them, or whatever you do with phones nowadays, FaceTime. Yeah. And I can have a conversation with them and they get me. Right. Where.
Yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. It's different. It's different. And if you're in the same city, there is this sense of, it's not really, it's not as much competition. That's a positive way to say it. It's more insecurity. I don't know if I want to be real with you. Yeah. I don't know if I can be real with you.
Yeah, you have to take a risk.
And because one of the things I've learned about pastors over the years is they're great at giving advice. And it's hard to tell a pastor you're hurting and not have them go, well, have you tried this? Have you thought about this? I read this book, or, like that kind of thing. And so, you learn. Yeah. Sometimes you have to go through a lot to get there, though.
So, what are you going to do now?
Well, I've realized it's been about 8 weeks since I've come to this realization that I wanted to step away from CitiServe. And I'm kind of doing it the same way I did with Evangel. I've just said, whatever happens next with CitiServe is up to the board. Mm-hmm. Let them decide. So I'm not trying to control it or direct it. I'm not really concerned about legacy or anything like that. I think it's a valuable asset. Mm-hmm. And so the board will have to decide whether the asset is valuable enough to continue or not. And I don't know what they're going to do. But when I've made that decision, what I realized was I need to stop being the leader for a while. And almost immediately, like next week, somebody asked me to do something.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I heard that you were not going to be leading CitiServe. Well, how about doing this?
Over here?
And so it's like, no. So I've made this promise to myself that I'm not going to do anything new until after the summer's over. That's good. And part of it is because part of what drives me is creativity. I love being creative. I love trying stuff. I love, just like throwing it out there and see what happens, which is fun.
Right.
But it's exhausting too.
Yeah, it's hard.
Because you leave your heart out there with everything you try. And so I'm gonna
You're gonna rest.
Ride my bike a lot.
Yeah.
Spend a lot of time with Jody. She retired last June, so she's finally come to the place where she doesn't have to be a nurse every day. Right. And she's a lot of fun to be around, and we've been doing a lot of fun stuff together. I want to spend more time with my grandkids and my kids, and so yeah, it doesn't feel like retirement, because I haven't really used that word, and I don't like that word, because it seems to me that in our culture it means to stop working. Right. And I don't want to stop anything. Yeah. I just don't want to be the leader of anything for a while.
That's helpful.
Yeah. I think it'd be good for me. And I'm 70. Like, at what point do you stop being the guy? You know, I think it's good to let somebody, a lot of people say, well, why don't you do this anymore? Why don't you do this? And it's like, I have to get out of the way so somebody younger
Someone else will
has a place to do it.
They won't step in if you're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes they won't even if you get out of the way. But I don't want to be the guy that is holding on to the keys of the car and let somebody drive every once in a while, but never give them the keys.
Yeah, it's good.
So I'm going to keep being me. I'm going to keep meeting with pastors because they're my friends, not because it's my role anymore.
Well, you're relational, so you can't stop being who you are.
Well, I could. Doesn't sound like much fun.
I don't think you could. I think it's part of your essence. So.
Yeah, and you left, what, 3 years ago now?
Yeah, 3.5 years ago.
Almost the same time. You left about the same time.
Right.
CitiServe started.
Right when CitiServe started, yes.
But, you know what it's like to transition and change the way you do life.
Right.
I don't know that.
That's true.
I don't know what that's like. So maybe I'll figure out a way to do that. I have a real heart for the next generation. So I think whatever I do, I want to be helpful to them to help them do what God's called them to do.
I can't see you doing anything else but helping people, even if it's just drinking coffee and talking, which you do really well.
Yeah.
So the city, I'm going to represent the city of Longview and Kelso for a minute and say the city has appreciated and been honored and impacted by you in ways that we can't even guess. So you have done good work. If I could be the Lord, I would say he's saying, well done, good and faithful servant. So thank you. Thanks for your friendship. Thanks for your service. Thanks for your example. You're leading really well. And relax now. Ride your bike. Don't lead for a while and rest.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
It'll probably be a little bit of a wrestling match, but I really appreciate you saying that, Chris.
Yeah.
I mean, for one, it means something coming from you because you've been on the journey with me.
Yep.
You know, and it wasn't like it was always easy.
Oh no, there were hard days.
And so when you go through tough stuff with somebody and you get to the other side and they're still there, even though you're not here in the city, I still feel like you're in my life in the same way. And so
still deeply connected.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you. It's been fun.